He left us there to die. No food, no heat, no comfort. Just the roar of the sea, broken glass biting at our feet, and the bitter realization that our own son, our only son, had cast us aside like a pair of worn-out shoes. He thought the lighthouse would be our tomb. He was wrong. If you've ever known betrayal by someone you trusted most, lean in close. This story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and have you ever had to find strength when everyone expected you to break? I suppose I should start at the beginning, though my hands tremble even now as I remember. My name is Thomas Whitfield, and I am an old man. My wife Eleanor is the gentlest soul you could ever meet, and our son, our only son, Gregory. He was supposed to be our pride, our comfort in the final chapters of our life. Instead, he became the architect of our deepest suffering. We raised him in the Whitfield estate, a home with rolling gardens, tall oaks that reached like arms toward the sky, and a library that smelled of polished wood and time. It wasn't perfect. We never had great wealth, but it was ours, and we poured every ounce of ourselves into him. I remember when Gregory was a boy, maybe 7 years old, climbing onto my shoulders to pick apples from the high branches. His laugh was light, free. Eleanor would wave from the kitchen window, her apron streaked with flour, her face soft with love. Back then, we thought we were a family bound by something unbreakable, but years have a cruel way of changing people. Gregory grew restless, impatient. He wanted more money, more status, more power. The estate wasn't enough. We were not enough. When Eleanor's health began to falter, when my hands stiffened with arthritis, I suppose we became burdens in his eyes. We asked only for love, for patience, for time. Instead, he gave us coldness, sharp words, and one final betrayal. I'll never forget the day he walked us to the lighthouse. The sky was gray, the sea restless. The gulls wheeled overhead, shrieking like omens. "This place," he said, forcing a smile that didn't touch his eyes, "will be perfect for you. Peaceful, quiet. You've always loved the sea." I stared at the crumbling tower, its windows like dark, broken teeth, its metal stairs curled in rust. My heart sank. Eleanor clutched my arm, her frail body trembling. "Gregory," she whispered, her voice thin with disbelief. "This is no home, this is ruin." He shrugged. "It's all I can do. The estate is mine now. You'll manage." And with that, he left us. A suitcase each, no savings, no support. Just Marlowe, our tabby cat, who leapt from the carriage at the last moment to follow us into exile. Gregory didn't even glance back. His car disappeared into the mist, tires spitting gravel, and with it went the last illusion that we had a son who cared. That night, as the wind howled through shattered panes, Eleanor and I sat on the cold stone floor, Marlowe curled against her lap. I held her hand, listening to the crash of waves, the bitter air biting our skin. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in my chest, pressing, suffocating. Eleanor cried softly, whispering, "Why, Thomas? Why would he do this to us?" I had no answer. Only the ache of shame. Had we failed him as parents? Had all our sacrifices meant nothing? But then, Marlowe stirred. Our faithful cat stretched, padded silently to a wall, and began pawing at a loose stone. A hollow echo answered. Curious, I pried the stone loose. Behind it, a hidden latch, and beyond that, a sealed storage room. The air smelled of oil, salt, and age. Inside were relics of another life. My wife's great-grandfather had been a lighthouse keeper long ago. His journals, tools, oil lamps, fishing nets, even a hand-cranked desalination device. Forgotten provisions lined the shelves, still sealed tight. It was as though the tower itself had been waiting for us. Eleanor's tears slowed. Her eyes, red from crying, widened with wonder. She touched the old lamp, whispering, "Perhaps we are not forsaken after all." And for the first time since Gregory abandoned us, a spark of something stirred in me. Not hope, not yet, but defiance. That was only the first night. The next morning, Marlowe once again led us, this time down jagged rocks beneath the lighthouse. There, hidden among moss and stone, was a trickle of fresh water. Pure, clean, bubbling up from some deep spring. We drank greedily, washing the salt from our throats. Eleanor cupped her hands, letting the cool water kiss her lips, and I swear some of the sickness seemed to lift from her then and there. Her breathing, so often ragged from asthma, felt freer. The tightness in her chest began to ease. And me, my aching joints, so often stiff and swollen, softened under the mineral-rich water. I could bend my knees, clench my fists without the same stabbing pain. It was as though the earth itself had taken pity on us. We began to rebuild, piece by piece, brick by brick. Eleanor tended to a small patch of soil in the courtyard, planting seeds we'd salvaged from the storage. I scavenged driftwood and metal scraps, patching walls, sealing windows. With the old journals as guides, we learned to use the desalination device, the nets, the lamps. Days blurred into weeks. Our bodies strengthened, our spirits lifted, and at night the lantern room glowed once more, its beam slicing through the mist, a defiant cry against the darkness. But deep inside, even as we built our new life, the wound remained. Our son had cast us aside. He believed we would wither, crumble, disappear. I swore then, if ever he returned, he would see. He would see the strength of the parents he betrayed. He would see what we built from his cruelty. And he would learn, in a way he'd never forget, that the ones he abandoned were far stronger than the man who abandoned them. The weeks after Gregory abandoned us were the hardest of my life. There's a kind of silence that sets in when the world has forgotten you. Not the peaceful silence of a country morning, not the hush of snowfall. No, this silence is cruel. It presses in, broken only by the shriek of gulls and the crash of waves battering stone. It reminds you that you are small, unwanted, disposable. At first, Eleanor and I tried to keep busy, just to outrun that silence. I worked on repairing the windows with driftwood, hammering and binding with rope until my knuckles bled. Eleanor planted the seeds she'd found, whispering to them like they were children. She'd sit by the little patch of earth every morning, smoothing the soil with her frail hands, murmuring encouragements. But when night fell and the winds tore through the broken tower, the silence found us again. And with it came the questions. Had we been such poor parents that our only son could abandon us? Were we truly so much of a burden that he preferred the thought of us starving in ruin rather than sharing a roof? I tried not to show Eleanor the heaviness in my chest, but she saw it all the same. She always did. "Thomas," she whispered one night, her face lit only by the faint glow of an oil lamp, "promise me we won't let him take the last of our joy, not our love, not our hope." I held her hand, gnarled fingers tightening around hers. "I promise," I said, though my voice cracked. "We will not give him that satisfaction." It wasn't just our hearts that carried the weight. Our bodies bore it too. The first month, every step up the lighthouse stairs was agony. My knees screamed. My back ached from lifting beams and patching walls. Eleanor coughed so hard at night, I feared she'd stop breathing altogether. But slowly, something began to change. The mineral-rich spring water soothed my joints in ways no doctor's prescription ever had. Each time I bent to drink, it felt as though the sea itself was scrubbing rust from my bones. My hands steadied, my steps grew surer. Eleanor's asthma eased as the salty winds whipped through the tower. Her wheezing softened, her lungs expanding with each deep breath of clean ocean air. For the first time in years she could laugh without dissolving into a fit of coughing. One evening, she looked at me with a sparkle in her eye, something I hadn't seen in so long, and said, "Thomas, I feel alive again. Like the sea has taken pity on me." I chuckled, though truthfully I felt it too. The lighthouse was no longer a tomb. It was a crucible. But miracles of the body didn't change the fact that our stomachs were empty. The provisions in the storage were limited. A few sealed tins, some old dried beans, a handful of flour, enough to keep us alive but not enough to thrive. I tried fishing with the nets left behind by Eleanor's great-grandfather, but the first few weeks were failures. The sea mocked me, waves slapping the nets back empty. My hands blistered, salt burned my cuts, and frustration mounted. Eleanor comforted me each time, insisting that patience would bring results. And then, one morning, Marlowe padded down the rocks, tail twitching, and meowed until I followed him. He led me to a natural pool formed by the tide, where fish darted back and forth in the clear water. I set the net carefully, heart pounding, and within minutes pulled it up, silver flashes writhing within. That night we feasted like kings, fresh fish roasted over a driftwood fire. Eleanor closed her eyes as she chewed, whispering, "Oh, Thomas, it tastes like life itself." From that day forward, Marlowe became our silent guardian, leading me to hidden fishing spots, sniffing out edible herbs, even chasing off gulls that dared threaten our crops. He was more than a cat. He was our compass, our protector, our miracle wrapped in fur. The seeds Eleanor planted took root in ways I hadn't dared hope. The soil, nourished by the mineral spring, sprouted green shoots strong and defiant against the wind. Soon we had beans, hardy greens, and wild herbs dotting the courtyard. Eleanor tended them like children, humming old lullabies as she watered and pruned. I would watch her from the window, the glow of evening sun painting her hair silver gold, and I'd feel something stirring in my chest, something I hadn't felt since Gregory was a little boy running through the orchard. It was pride, not in our son, but in us, in what we were building despite him. The day we restored the lantern room was the day the lighthouse became more than survival. It became defiance. The glass panes were cracked, the metal corroded, but slowly, with patience and stubbornness, we cleaned and patched and polished. I rigged the salvaged solar panels to power a makeshift bulb, and when we flipped the switch for the first time, the beam cut through the mist. "Strong, steady," Eleanor cried, her hands pressed to her lips. "Thomas," she whispered, "it's alive again." I stood there, arm wrapped around her frail shoulders, watching the light sweep across the dark waves. And inside me, something hardened. That light was no longer just for sailors. It was a message, a declaration to the sun who cast us aside. "You failed to bury us. We are stronger than you ever believed." It wasn't long before others noticed. A fishing boat, caught in a storm, spotted the glow and steered toward safety. The sailors were weary, soaked to the bone, but when they stumbled ashore and saw Eleanor with her basket of herbs and me with the spring water, their eyes widened. "You saved us," one of them said. "This light, this place, it's a miracle." They returned weeks later, bringing gifts, ropes, fresh bread, nails, tools. Word spread. Soon other struggling souls came, a mother with a feverish child, a man who'd lost his boat, travelers seeking shelter from the sea's fury. Eleanor welcomed them all, her nurturing spirit shining brighter than the lantern. I offered them water, food, guidance. Together, we became caretakers of something bigger than ourselves. The lighthouse was no longer just our home, it was a haven. But even as the community blossomed, the shadow of Gregory lingered. Sometimes, late at night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling as the waves crashed against stone. I'd see his face, the smug tilt of his lips when he left us, the coldness in his eyes. Eleanor would sense my unrest. "You're thinking of him again," she'd murmur. I would nod, unable to lie. "Do not let him poison this," she would say firmly. "This place is ours now, not his." And yet, I couldn't stop imagining. What would he say if he saw the lighthouse thriving? If he saw us, not broken and begging, but standing strong, surrounded by a community that loved us? Would it shame him, anger him, or worse? Would he come back to take it from us? That thought chilled me more than any ocean wind, because deep down, I knew Gregory. I knew his greed, and I knew he would not stay away forever. The lighthouse grew stronger each day, but so did the unease in my chest. I began to notice changes in the weather, darker skies, harsher winds, storms gathering more often on the horizon. Sailors warned of a season unlike any other, tempests that could tear apart ships like toys. And in the midst of this brewing chaos, I began to dream. Dreams of Gregory. Standing at the lighthouse door, his suit soaked with rain, his face twisted in a mixture of greed and fear. Dreams of him demanding entry, demanding control, dreams of storms that forced us together once more with no escape. I would wake drenched in sweat, heart hammering, staring at the ceiling as the lantern beam swept across the dark. Eleanor would stir, whispering, "What is it, Thomas?" And I would lie. "Nothing, my love. Nothing at all." But deep inside, I knew the truth. Gregory would return, and when he did, the sea itself would bear witness to our reckoning. The first hint of Gregory's return came not from him, but from whispers carried by the sea. One afternoon, as Eleanor tended the garden and I patched a section of the courtyard wall, a fisherman approached with a nervous expression. His boat rocked at the shore behind him, its sails tattered from a recent squall. "Thomas," he said, wringing his cap in his hands, "I don't know how to tell you this, but your son's been seen in town, talking to developers, men in fine coats. They've been asking questions about this land." The hammer slipped from my grip. The sound of it clattering against the stone made Eleanor glance up sharply. "Developers?" I asked, though the bile was already rising in my throat. The fisherman nodded. "He's telling folk that he owns this lighthouse, that it's sitting on valuable coastal land. Some say he's planning to sell it, to tear it down, build resorts." My vision blurred with rage. I steadied myself against the wall, the old arthritis in my hands flaring. But it wasn't age this time. It was fury. Eleanor, pale but resolute, stepped forward. "This lighthouse is ours," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "We built it back from ruin with our own hands. How dare he, after what he's done, think to take it from us?" The fisherman looked at us with pity. "I thought you should know. He's coming, and soon." That night sleep abandoned me. I sat by the window, watching lightning flicker far out at sea, veins of fire cutting through the black sky. The storm season was worsening. The air felt charged, restless, as though the very heavens were preparing for something monumental. And with each thunderclap, I saw Gregory's face, his smirk as he handed us over to ruin, his callous words echoing in my ears. "You'll manage." Eleanor stirred beside me, whispering in the darkness. "Thomas, you're shaking." "I can't stop thinking about him," I admitted. "About what he'll do when he arrives. He won't just come to talk. He'll come to take." Her hand found mine, frail but steady. "Then we will not let him." There was a steel in her tone that I hadn't heard in years, not since the early days of our marriage, when we'd fought tooth and nail to keep the estate afloat. I turned to her and saw in her eyes the same fire I felt burning in my chest. We had been cast aside, yes, but we had not been destroyed, and we would not surrender, not to Gregory, not to anyone. It was 2 weeks later when he came. The day was thick with storm clouds, the air heavy with salt and tension. Eleanor and I were in the lantern room, adjusting the beam before the storm, when we saw a sleek black car crawl along the distant road, winding its way toward the cliffside. No one in these parts owned such a car, not unless they came from wealth. My breath caught, my fists clenched. And then I saw him. Gregory. He stepped from the car, umbrella snapping open against the wind, his shoes polished, his coat tailored. He looked out of place here like a crow strutting among doves. His face was thinner than I remembered, sharper, but his eyes, oh, his eyes hadn't changed, cold, calculating, greedy. Eleanor gasped softly beside me. "Thomas, it's him." I said nothing. My jaw ached from how tightly I clenched it. We watched as he approached the lighthouse, his lips curled in a smirk, as though this place, our sanctuary, were already his. He didn't bother knocking. He barged in, tracking rainwater across the stone floor, looking around with disdain. "Well," he drawled, "you've made quite the project of this ruin, haven't you?" Eleanor stiffened, clutching Marlowe to her chest. "Gregory," she said, her voice trembling with restrained fury, "how dare you show your face here?" He waved a dismissive hand. Now, mother. No need for dramatics. I've come to discuss business." "Business?" I growled. "Yes. This land. It's valuable. Developers are interested. Resorts, spas, luxury villas. They're willing to pay a fortune for it." He smiled, a serpent smile. and as the rightful heir of the Whitfield estate, the deed is mine. This lighthouse is mine. I stepped forward, fury vibrating through every bone. You abandoned us here to rot. This place was ruin when you left us. Everything you see now, every wall, every window, every blade of grass in that garden, we rebuilt. With our hands, with our sweat, with our blood. He smirked. And? You've made my land more valuable. Congratulations. But it's time for you to leave. You've had your fun. Eleanor gasped, tears brimming. Leave! This is our home! Gregory's eyes hardened. Not for long. That night, the storm came. It howled with a fury I had never known. The wind screamed through the cracks, the waves hammered the cliff, rain lashed against the stone like knives, and we were trapped inside together. Gregory paced the halls, restless and irritated, muttering about poor accommodations and ruined shoes. Eleanor and I remained in the lantern room, tending the beam, ensuring no ship would be lost in the chaos. At one point, he sneered at us. "You're wasting your time. This lighthouse will be gone soon, torn down, sold off. You'll be in some home, tucked away where you belong." I turned to him then, my voice low, steady, dangerous. "No, Gregory, you're wrong. This place is stronger than you, stronger than your greed, and it will outlast you." He laughed, but there was unease in his eyes, because even he could feel it, the storm battering the tower, the walls groaning, the sea raging. And yet, the lighthouse stood firm. It was in that storm, trapped together, that the shift began. The community, those sailors, travelers, and families who had found refuge in our haven, appeared at dawn, braving the rain to check on us. They brought food, blankets, and candles, their voices filling the stone halls with warmth. Gregory stared at them in disbelief. "What is this?" he demanded. "Why are all these people here?" "They are family," Eleanor said simply. "The family we chose when you abandoned us." The words struck him harder than any blow. I saw it in the flicker of his expression, the way his lips pressed tight. For the first time, Gregory realized he wasn't dealing with two frail, discarded parents. He was facing a community, a sanctuary, a force larger than himself. And that realization unsettled him. It wasn't enough that Gregory felt shame. It wasn't enough that he saw our strength. No, he had to learn. He had to experience firsthand the weight of abandonment, the taste of helplessness. That night, as the storm raged, Eleanor and I lay awake, whispering our plan. "He left us here with nothing," she murmured. "We should let him feel the same. Let him see what it means to be powerless." I nodded, fire burning in my chest. "He thinks he owns this land because of a piece of paper, but ownership is more than deeds. It's blood, sweat, roots. We will show him that." And so the plan took shape, not of violence, but of humiliation, of poetic justice. We would not strike him with fists. We would strike him with truth, with community, with the undeniable evidence that he was the one abandoned, forgotten, irrelevant. We would let him feel the storm, not just of the sea, but of the people who had chosen us over him. And when the storm finally broke, when the sun rose over the battered sea, Gregory would no longer be the man who cast us aside. He would be the man cast aside himself. The storm that night raged without mercy. Waves hammered the cliff, lightning ripped open the sky, and the lighthouse shook as though giants pressed against it, testing its strength. Inside, we huddled in the lantern room, the great beam cutting defiantly through rain and mist. Gregory paced like a caged animal, his polished shoes squeaking against wet stone. He muttered curses under his breath, glaring at the walls, at us, at the storm itself, as though nature had conspired against his plans. But the truth was clearer than ever. The lighthouse stood firm, and so did we. At dawn, when the storm's fury eased to a steady roar, the community arrived, dozens of them soaked to the bone, trudging through mud and rain to the lighthouse doors. They carried food, blankets, and medicine, their voices rising in song as they approached. Gregory froze when he saw them. He'd expected ruin, despair, isolation. Instead, he witnessed loyalty. A crowd of people who loved and protected us, people who would never abandon us. "What is this?" he demanded, his face pale. "This," Eleanor said, stepping forward with Marlowe in her arms. "His family." The words cut him like a blade. The villagers greeted us warmly, pressing food into our hands, checking the walls, tending the garden. They barely glanced at Gregory. To them, he was a stranger. I watched his face tighten as realization dawned. In their eyes, he was nobody. We were the ones who mattered. Later, as the storm clouds broke, Gregory tried again. He stood before the crowd, his voice loud, commanding. "Listen to me. This land belongs to me. I hold the deed. Whatever you've built here, it's mine. And I'll be selling it to developers soon. You'll all have to leave." A hush fell. The villagers turned to Eleanor and me, their faces calm but firm. Then one man stepped forward, a fisherman named Caleb, who had nearly lost his life before our lantern guided him to shore. His voice carried the weight of the sea. "You may hold a paper," Caleb said, "but you don't hold this place. These walls were raised by their hands. This garden grew by their labor. This light shines because of them. You did nothing. You are nothing here." The crowd murmured agreement. Eleanor's eyes shone with unshed tears, her frail hands tightening around mine. Gregory's face reddened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, his arrogance cracked. That night, as the villagers shared food and laughter inside the lighthouse, Gregory sat alone in a corner, ignored, unwanted. His fine clothes were damp, his umbrella broken, his polished shoes caked in mud. And we watched. For hours, we watched him sit in the silence he had once condemned us to. The silence of being unwanted, forgotten, irrelevant. Every time he tried to speak, the conversation flowed around him. Every time he demanded attention, eyes slid past him. He was invisible in the very place he had come to claim. Eleanor leaned close, her voice low in my ear. "He feels it now, Thomas. The loneliness, the abandonment." I nodded. Let him taste what he fed us. And as the lantern beam swept across the dark sea, I felt the satisfaction rise. This was revenge, not of violence but of truth. By the third day of the storm, Gregory was unraveling. His hair, once slicked back neatly, hung limp. His coat was stained, his shoes ruined. He snapped at the villagers, shouted at Eleanor, cursed at me, but no one responded. The lighthouse community treated him as though he were air. At one point, he cornered me in the stairwell, his eyes wild. "Why are they ignoring me?" he demanded. "I'm your son. I own this place. Why won't they listen?" I looked him squarely in the eyes, my voice steady as stone. "Because ownership isn't in papers, Gregory. It's in sacrifice, in love, in loyalty, and you gave us none of those. You abandoned us, and in doing so, you abandoned yourself." He recoiled as though struck. His lips trembled, but no words came. For the first time in his life, Gregory was powerless. When the storm finally broke and the sun rose golden over the battered sea, the villagers gathered on the balcony. We stood with them, Marlowe perched proudly at Eleanor's feet. Gregory lingered at the edge, hollow-eyed, silent. Eleanor stepped forward, her voice carrying across the wind. "This lighthouse was once ruin," she said, "but it became a home, a sanctuary, a beacon of hope, not because of greed, not because of power, but because of love." Her eyes flicked to Gregory. "And love cannot be bought, stolen, or signed away. It is lived, it is given, it is earned." The villagers erupted in cheers, their voices echoing over the waves. Gregory sank to his knees, his face in his hands. His sobs were muffled by the wind, but we all heard them. The proud, selfish man was gone. In his place knelt a broken figure, a man forced to face the truth of what he had done. It took weeks, but slowly, Gregory began to change. He stayed in the village, at first out of shame, then out of need. He worked alongside the fishermen, hauling nets. He carried supplies, patched roofs, tended fires. The arrogance faded, replaced by something raw, something like humility. He apologized, haltingly at first, then with tears. To us, to the villagers, to himself. Eleanor, with her gentle heart, forgave him before I could. She always had more grace than I. But even I, in time, saw the sincerity in his eyes. He was no longer the man who abandoned us. He was a man reborn in the crucible of shame and truth. Months later, with the villagers' help, we established the Lighthouse Haven Foundation, a sanctuary for the lost, the weary, the abandoned. A place where the spring healed bodies, the gardens fed souls, and the lantern guided hearts back to hope. Gregory, to my surprise, became its fiercest advocate. He used his skills, his connections, his silver tongue, but this time not for greed, for good. The foundation flourished. Travelers came from miles away, drawn by whispers of the healing lighthouse, and each time they arrived, they found not just Eleanor and me, but an entire community waiting with open arms. Now, as I sit on the balcony with Eleanor beside me and Marlowe curled at our feet, I watch the horizon glow with the lantern's beam. The sea is calm tonight. The stars scatter like jewels across the sky. And in the distance, the faint glow of ships turning toward us, guided home by the light. Eleanor leans her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever think of that first night?" she asks softly. "When we thought this place would be our tomb?" I nod, my throat thick. Every day. But it wasn't our end. It was our beginning. And as Gregory works alongside the villagers below, his laughter mingling with theirs, I feel a strange peace. He abandoned us once, but in doing so, he gave us something greater than we could have imagined, the chance to build a paradise from ruin. And now, the light that was meant to be our death has become a symbol of resilience, of justice, of revenge served not with cruelty, but with truth. The lighthouse stands eternal, and so do we. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes quietly, when the person who tried to bury you is forced to watch you bloom. Gregory thought the lighthouse would be our grave. Instead, it became our triumph, and though we forgave him, the lesson will never leave him. The ones you abandon may rise stronger than you could ever imagine, and their light will outshine your darkness. And that's the story of how abandonment became revenge, and how revenge became redemption. If this tale struck a chord with you, give it a like, subscribe for more, and share in the comments. Have you ever found strength in the very place someone meant for your downfall? Until next time, may your light never dim.